Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Amanda Vinicky. Brandis Friedman is on assignment. On the show tonight,
there's a lot of different pieces that I think inure to the benefit of the city of Chicago.
It's official. Chicago is getting another 10 years of Lollapalooza. What the deal could mean for city revenue and the music industry.
After being a victim of a hate crime over hosting a family-friendly drag show, a suburban bakery is told it can no longer host public events. We have the details.
They encouraged their students to protest, but almost lost their jobs because of it. The two CPS teachers share their reactions.
We urge Russia to take that offer seriously.
Efforts to release WNBA star Brittany Griner from detention in Russia hit a snag. We'll have the latest.
Could another insurance price hike mean a red light for some drivers? That and more from Cranes.
There he is, White Sox great Minnie Minoso. He receives baseball's highest honor. We talk with family and friends about finally seeing this long-awaited recognition.
And the legendary Bud Billiken Parade is expanding its reach to a prominent downtown building. But first, there we go. Got to see those Bud Billiken. Here it is. We're going to get to some of today's top stories, beginning with Al-Qaeda leader Ayman al-Zawahiri has been killed in a U.S. drone strike in Afghanistan. Al-Zawahiri, an Egyptian, took over the leadership of the terrorist organization after the U.S. killed its longtime leader, Osama bin Laden, in 2011. President Joe Biden confirmed al-Zawahiri's death in a video address earlier this evening. The monkeypox virus is a public health emergency in Illinois per a proclamation issued by the governor. In a statement, Governor J.B. Pritzker says he's making the emergency declaration to expand the resources and coordination efforts of state agencies in responding to the outbreak. The virus has so far been found to disproportionately spread among men who have sex with other men. Pritzker says the state will ensure that members of the LGBTQ+ community have the resources they need to stay safe while also ensuring they're not stigmatized. According to the Illinois Department of Public Health, there are currently 520 probable and confirmed cases of monkeypox in Illinois. Domestic workers in Illinois must now be paid at least the state minimum wage, currently $12 that is an hour. They're also entitled to overtime pay. It comes as the Illinois Department of Labor has finalized rules surrounding domestic workers' employment. The changes come after state lawmakers extended minimum wage protections to domestic workers who'd previously been excluded from the law. Under the amended rules, employers are now required to pay domestic workers for all hours worked, including time and a half for overtime, specify how they will account for rest and sleep periods, set parameters for when meal or lodging costs can be deducted, and keep wage and hour records. Up next, Lollapalooza gets an encore in Chicago. Stay with us for more.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabie Family, the POLK Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Good news for festival goers and music fanatics. Lollapalooza is staying in Chicago for at least another 10 years. Not so good for the festival's attractors or those that believe it shouldn't be held in Grant Park. City officials and production company C3 Presents confirmed the pact late last night as the four-day music festival came to an end. The city says Lollapalooza has generated nearly $2 billion for Chicago's economy since 2010, with just over $300 million in 2021 alone.
As the revenues improve year over year, we get to share in that with Lolla. So we're really partners in this together. And I think having that stability so frankly they can book their artists years in advance really is, I think, to benefit not only to them, but also a benefit to us. It's a benefit to hotels and restaurants.
And here to discuss this deal and more is Selena Fragasi, entertainment contributor for the Chicago Sun-Times. She's been covering Lolla for the past 12 years for various publications. And Michael Jacobson, president and CEO of the Illinois Hotel and Lodging Association. We also invited a city representative as well as C3 Presents, but did not receive a response. And we are glad that the two of you are here. Selena, we mentioned you've been covering this since its revival as a Chicago Fest back 12 years ago. The city touts its massive economic benefits. Is it the economic boon that officials advertise it as?
I mean, I would say so. It's been said that $2 billion has been brought in since the advent in 2010, or since 2010, I should say. And I think, you know, if you see all the people that come, and there's a large percentage that come from outside of Chicago, you see the hotel rooms are booked at nearly 90%. I think Michael can speak to. A lot of restaurants are full. A lot of celebrities are going to restaurants, increasing their profile. So I think so.
And that contract states that something like $22 million or $2.2 million goes to Chicago Public Schools, and of course then there are the tax benefits from the amusement tax. So Michael Jacobson, what has it meant for the hospitality industry in terms of revenues and then the taxes they generate?
Really, over the last 10, 15 years, Lollapalooza is always our biggest weekend of the year for our hotels. So most of our hotels were sold out this past weekend at a pretty high rate. And when you look at the impact that that has, not just on our hotels, but the broader economy, and more importantly, to your point, on the tax revenue, just last year, there were $13 million in tax expenditures generated just within our hotels, not including when those attendees go out and ride in our taxi cabs or eat in our restaurants or go and visit museums. These attendees don't just go between our hotels to Grand Park and back and forth. They're doing so many other things across our city. And I think more importantly, it's important to our city's brand. We know that we need a morale boost right now, not just here locally, but around the world. And look at the fact that we bring 400,000 people from every corner of the world. I don't think you can really put a price tag on what that means for the city's brand and reputation.
Lollapalooza itself being an international brand at this point. Selena, this 10-year extension, is the festival going to look any different going forward than it has the last several years?
Well, they're extending the capacity, so I think there's going to be 15,000 more people every year. So it'll be interesting to see how they are going to expand the footprint of the festival that's already so large to bring in all those people. But I think, as we saw with J-Hope yesterday, who's a member of BTS, who's bringing in a totally different demographic.
This is a South Korean music group, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, just wanted to clarify that. Go ahead.
And so they're on hiatus right now, and he has embarked on a solo career. It was historic, actually, yesterday. It was his first U.S. festival appearance, and it brought in a whole new demographic of people. So I think the more that Lollapalooza is playing with their music curation, the more people that are going to come in that weren't maybe there before.
So they've really tried to expand their bookings to appeal to a broader audience here. Michael Jacobson, obviously it is a boon to your industry, but then you have aldermen like Brendan Riley downtown, Sophia King, saying the city's negotiating these contracts without any oversight from city council. Should there be more transparency here?
Well, I think that's the whole purpose of why you have city agencies. Look, there's festivals in every park across the city, in every neighborhood, every weekend of the summer. We can't rely on city council to negotiate every single contract for every single festival. That's why we have the Chicago Park District and DCASE, the Office of Special Events, is to work through these contracts and figure out what's best for the city and what's best for the residents. And I think that's what you saw here. So I think the city council absolutely has a role in a say of how things should be done, but I don't think they can get in the weeds of every single contract for every festival.
Well, I should mention, though, certainly those neighborhood festivals are much, much, much smaller in scale than Lollapalooza, which is gigantic. Selena Fergassi, what impact has the festival had on the music scene in Chicago? I remember many years ago, club owners complaining about a restrictive contract where they weren't allowed to play at any local clubs for several months. Now that's gone away, correct?
That I'm not actually sure about, but I do know that venues benefit from this as well, because you talk about all the official after shows. Green Day just played an amazing show at Metro that was a really coveted spot, and I think it raised Metro's profile. Billy Joe was wearing a Metro shirt on stage last night. So I think venues will still benefit from having Lollapalooza here. And I think in terms of, you know, music acts, there's a great stage at Lollapalooza called the BMI stage, which is really a discovery platform. A lot of bands have made their careers there, including Chance the Rapper.
Chance the Rapper, who appeared in a special appearance this weekend, even though he wasn't booked. Michael, how has the hospitality industry handled the safety concerns, given the fact that there's a mass shooting seemingly happening every week in the United States, and there have been concerns about security around Lollapalooza?
Yeah, and it's not even unique to Lollapalooza. We're lucky enough to have a great relationship and partnership with Chicago Police Department, the Office of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, but also state and federal agencies. It's really an all-hands-on-deck situation for an event like Lollapalooza. We had no major issues, which is great to hear. It's such a large festival. But I think, again, it's a year-round discussion of how to make sure that our guests and our visitors are kept safe. And there's a lot of precautions and protocols that, frankly, most visitors don't even realize or don't even see that are behind the scenes, both within our hotels and outside of our hotels, to make sure that those visitors are kept safe. So we're really happy with the way the weekend went, and we're thankful for the partnerships we have to make sure that everyone's kept safe.
No major safety incidents that we know of reported at this point. Michael, I'll stick with you for this question. Again, knowing that this is a major benefit to the industry that you represent, but what about the folks that live in and around the Loop or the South Loop that say Grant Park really shouldn't be taken out of commission to the public for such a long period of time in the summer? What about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the value of our parks, that's what makes Chicago great. It's just a beautiful city, and the parks play a big role in that. I think at the same time, especially as we wait for return to office to really pick up, and there's all this conversation on how we reinvigorate the central business district and get people downtown, you hear a lot of people say we need to think differently to make sure that the business activity keeps up downtown. So I think when you look at Lollapalooza or even the NASCAR race, which is taking a lot of heat right now, you can't say we need to think differently to reinvigorate downtown and then criticize every single event that we bring downtown to bring, as Selena said, that kind of new demographic of people that traditionally wouldn't come into the Loop and support our economy the way they do. So I think it's a balancing act. I'm not saying keep the park closed for months on end and restrict it to residents, but I think there's a balancing act to be had, and I'm hopeful that we found that.
All right, Selena, we only have about 30 seconds left, but quickly, your highlights of this weekend, the musical highlights of this weekend.
Oh my gosh, there were so many. There was a great Italian band yesterday called Måneskin who won the Eurovision contest over in Europe, but now they're breaking into America, and they had a phenomenal game-changing experience yesterday. Metallica was amazing, and I think J-Hope will really maybe embark on a solo career now with the success that his performance gave.
Absolutely, and I think that's when Mayor Lightfoot came out right before the J-Hope concert. I watched that Metallica set afterward, and man, they still bring it despite
41 years later.
60 years old. That's incredible. All right, thanks to Selena Fragazzi and Michael Jacobson. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A Northwest Suburban bakery is being told it cannot hold any future events in its shop. Last week we shared the story about a bakery and cafe in Lake in the Hills, a suburb 40 miles northwest of Chicago. It was the victim of a hate crime vandalized. It was preparing to host a family-friendly drag show. The bakery's owner told us about the ongoing threats and angry messages she continues to receive. And last Thursday, village officials told her the events violated a local ordinance and she had to refrain from holding them. And here to update us on what's been happening is Karina Sack, owner of Uprising Bakery and Cafe, and Kevin Fee, Senior Special Litigation Counsel at the ACLU of Illinois, which is working with Ms. Sack on this matter. And we also invited the village trustees of Lake in the Hills and the village administrator. They declined to join us this evening, but we do welcome the both of you. And Karina, welcome back. First, as I understand, you had a meeting with village officials about this last Thursday. What happened at that meeting?
So at this meeting, essentially, they went through and detailed exactly the resources that were required regarding our scheduled event, and then asked me and demanded that we host no more events.
And the next day you received a letter saying, quote, should the village become aware of any entertainment events being advertised or taking place at Uprising Bakery and Cafe, it will pursue appropriate enforcement actions, including penalties up to $750 per day and the suspension or revocation of business and liquor license. So the village is basically saying here that your building is not zoned for any kind of entertainment events, just zoned for retail. What is your response to this?
Well, initially when I received the letter, I was definitely disappointed and felt let down. I felt like the village really decided to change course only after the attack, when they informed me that I could no longer hold these events. And that left me feeling very unsupported and just really disappointed in what I thought was, support from the community and our village.
And Kevin Fee, why did the ACLU want to get involved here?
Well, as you know, Paris, the ACLU has been involved for over 100 years in protecting citizens and businesses' First Amendment rights. And anytime a government entity takes actions to shut down constitutionally protected speech, it certainly gets our attention. And we believe that's exactly what happened here. The village was supportive of Ms. Sack's events at Uprising Bakery for months and months until the business was attacked by an extremist vandal. And only at that point did they change course and suddenly tell her that she couldn't hold any more of not only these drag events that caused the controversy, but they canceled her Disney karaoke, various other family-friendly events entirely because they deemed the speech apparently too controversial. And that's a constitutional problem.
Although, Karina Sack, the village is basically saying their reasoning is because the landlord of the building has complained about it and other nearby businesses have complained. Your response to some of the reasoning that the village has given?
This was the first time I've heard that there were any complaints or violations. And we've been hosting events for we've hosted dozens of events over the months that we've been open, and this was the first time I was made aware of any of these complaints or alleged violations.
Yeah, and Paris, if I could just jump in there, I mean, to echo what Karina has said, it's important to remember this is not just our view and Karina's view. This is the village's own interpretation of its own zoning ordinance up until the point of the vandalism. In fact, the village had signed off on this drag event in advance, saying they found no problem with it going forward. It was only at the moment that the windows of the bakery were smashed and hateful anti-LGBTQ graffiti was scrawled all over the inside of the store that the village took this new position that we believe is a pure pretext and an excuse to shut down speech that the village has deemed simply too controversial.
So, Karina Sack, you've held many events there, not just the planned drag show, but open mics and art classes and things like that. Are you saying the village knew about these events and knew that it ostensibly violated its own zoning ordinance but had no problem with those events continuing?
Correct. So only when an event became controversial and uncomfortable for them did they decide to change course and host this meeting and try to enforce these zonings and codes.
And Kevin Fee, on legal grounds, I mean, the village is citing this ordinance, saying they are not zoned for entertainment. Do you have a strong legal case when the village is basically saying, well, we're just enforcing the ordinance we have on the books?
Well, first of all, Paris, it's problematic and unconstitutional for the village to selectively enforce a zoning ordinance based on the content of the speech at issue. But even so, within the four corners of the zoning ordinance, it's not our belief that there was any violation. And again, it was not the village's belief with respect to this business or any other B2 zone business up until the moment that these windows were smashed.
So, Karina Sack, is that your understanding? Is there room for, is there wiggle room in this ordinance? I mean, does it not necessarily mean you can't hold these events?
Yes, I believe there is wiggle room and there's discussion to be had.
And speaking of discussion, you received, last week when you talked to us, you told us about the letters that you were still receiving, very threatening letters, voicemails, obviously vandalism. Are you still receiving some of that, and what does it look like?
Yes, we are still receiving all of that. It's looking the same, and we're still working with the local police department and reporting everything as we should.
And Kevin Fee, there has been a man charged in connection with the vandalism, a 24-year-old from Alsip who was allegedly wearing Proud Boys clothing, allegedly a member of that far-right group. He was let out on a $1,000 bond. Do you think that was appropriate given the severity of what happened?
Well, we'll allow those criminal proceedings to play out. We don't really have any comment on the way that that's been handled, but we certainly are quite concerned about the idea of speech being targeted by extremists coming from outside the community and effectively getting what they wanted, which was to shut down these great community events.
All right, well, we will keep monitoring this case and this issue, and our thanks to Karina Sack and Kevin Fee. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we're back with more Chicago Tonight right after this, so please stick around.
We've made it.
Justice Jackson's appointment to the Supreme Court provides a beacon of hope.
Black women are underrepresented. We still rise. We still show up for one another.
It's us investing in the next generation and giving them something to enrich the next generation with.
One of the oldest parades on the city's south side is marching its way downtown. The beloved Bud Billiken Parade is being celebrated in a film projected beneath the stars. Arts correspondent Angel Ito takes us to the Loop for more on the story.
The Chicago Defender newspaper is really what caused the launch of the Bud Billiken Parade. It was the newsboys that would go out rain, sleet, or snow selling the newspaper, and Robert Abbott, great-granduncle, came up with the idea to celebrate them, gave them bikes and instruments to go down the street and celebrate, and that's how we started the Bud Billiken Parade in 1929.
93 years later, the Bud Billiken Parade, or the Bud, is still marching down King Drive, celebrating one of Chicago's most influential African-American newspapers.
We are able to show that, you know, the community can come together, kids can come together in a very positive and peaceful way.
The parade marches from 39th to 55th on King Drive, bringing together Black Chicagoans through entertainment, food, and fun. But this year, the parade is also taking over a prominent downtown building in a projection film titled Billiken. It features dancers from the Bringing Out Talent dance company.
We did get some footage last summer, not even knowing if we was going to actually make it on the Art on the Mart. But just to have the footage already prepared and ready, so it's definitely dope and exciting to see it.
As one of many dance groups to perform regularly in the parade, Shekinah Stewart says watching themselves downtown is important.
Seeing themselves up there, it pushes them to want more and do more. So we're going to hope that when they see this and their families see it and they see that we're doing things with the kids that, you know, we normally don't do, it's going to get bigger.
But that exposure the film provides isn't just for community members that attend the parade regularly.
It's so powerful that Bud Billiken will be displayed on Art on the Mart at the Merchandise Mart because it gives people from out of town an opportunity to know more about this great event that's huge beyond measure. But also those in the community can feel proud about their tradition. We're talking about 93 years. So 93 years and many generations get a chance to see the Bud Billiken displayed in a way that's never been displayed before.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
Such talent on display. Love to see it. Brilliant and large like that. You too can check it out. Billiken at Art on the Mart every night at 9 and 9:30. That's until September 7th. The Bud Billiken Parade itself, Saturday, August 13th. It is free to the public. Now, Paris, we toss it back to you.
All right, a great tradition. Thanks, Amanda. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, recent apartment sales reveal enthusiastic investors in Chicago's suburbs. That and more business news from Cranes. They encouraged their students to protest, but almost lost their jobs because of it. The two CPS teachers share their reactions. The release of American basketball superstar Brittany Griner from a Russian prison may have been hit with a diplomatic setback. And White Sox great Minnie Minoso receives baseball's highest honor. We talk with family and friends about finally seeing this long-awaited recognition. But first, some more of today's top stories. Police Superintendent David Brown says Chicago has seen a sharp drop in homicides and shootings this year.
Chicago has seen significant declines in both homicides and shootings for the 5th consecutive month. That's 5 in a row. We are down 38% in homicides this July compared to July 2021 and 25% in shootings compared this July to July in 2021.
And the police department also reports that 44 people were shot and 5 people killed in 36 separate shootings between Friday evening and Sunday night. The average price of a gallon of regular gas across the nation has dropped 63 cents in the past month. According to AAA, the national average for a gallon of regular is now $4.21. That's down 14 cents since last week. But gas prices in Chicago, while falling, are running well above that national average at $5.35 a gallon. The current average price in Illinois is $4.63. Star Trek actor and Illinois native Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura on the iconic original sci-fi series, has died at the age of 89. The trailblazing role included an on-screen interracial kiss with Captain Kirk actor William Shatner, just 1 year after the U.S. Supreme Court declared interracial marriage legal. Nichols often told the story of how she was persuaded to stick with the show after the first season, following a conversation with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. King, a fan of the show, told her she couldn't quit because of the importance of the role in changing perceptions of black people in America. Born in Robbins, Illinois, Nichols first worked in show business as a singer and dancer in Chicago at the age of 14. Her son Kyle Johnson says she died of natural causes Saturday in Silver City, New Mexico. And now, Amanda, we toss it back to you.
Thanks, Paris. State Farm hits Illinois auto customers with yet another price hike. Suburban apartments are seeing some major investment gains and a look at what's on the road ahead for electric truck maker Rivian. Here to go behind the headlines is Crane's Chicago business reporter Danny Ecker. Thanks, Danny. Now let's start with that story about State Farm. The insurance company raising auto rates for the third time in Illinois this year. Now, how much? Why another jump? Oh, wait, by the way, on top of high gas prices, inflation, all that.
Yeah, it's getting pretty tough to keep your car costs overall from soaring right now. State Farm, the average policy premium is going up by 8.4%, they announced, which actually may be its steepest one-time price hike ever in Illinois. That brings the total increase with two others they've had this year to 16%, which is about $127 per year for perspective. It's not really clear why it's been piecemeal, but we're seeing this across all the major auto insurers. Allstate and Geico have boosted their rates. And it's from, at least from State Farm's perspective, it's from inflation. Cost of labor and goods is up. Claim costs are higher. That means rates are going higher as well. And of course, we saw these rates they dropped in 2020. Now we've already come back and then some from those savings.
Perhaps if you do get into any sort of auto wreck or accident, of course, we know the price of cars is more expensive too. Renting a car, all that. Dang. Anyway, moving on. Cranes reports that nearly 1,300 apartments in the Chicago suburbs have changed hands in recent deals. Now, what does that say about the suburban apartment market?
Yeah, it says that investors have a lot of confidence in it. These were traded in two deals that covered apartments in Schaumburg, Palatine, Elgin, and Glenview. And this is actually just a few weeks after another apartment complex in Palatine set a record for the most money ever paid for a multifamily property in suburban Chicago. Suburban apartments have been doing well recently. Rents earlier this year were up 17% year over year. Occupancy remains high. And it's especially notable that this is happening as the economy has been more sluggish in recent weeks. These are deals that are coming with a lot of investors putting their pencils down and having seen interest rates surge. So it'd be interesting to see how many more deals we see like this.
And just briefly, Danny, is that different than the Chicago market?
Chicago market's been really the same. Downtown apartments have also been extremely strong. The demand for rentals right now is really one of the bright spots in commercial real estate.
Unless perhaps you're the renter. Now, lastly, Rivian has been building its R1T model since last September, but has struggled to ramp up its plant in Normal, Illinois, in central Illinois there, due to parts shortages. Yet, the company is opening service centers across the country. So, what's the latest? What gives?
Yeah, Rivian's going through some growing pains as it tries to compete in the electric vehicle space. It's especially tough these days with it's harder to get parts and more expensive. And Illinois obviously has a stake in Rivian's growth with the plant down in Normal. The company said last week it would be laying off about 6% of its workforce, but it can't really afford to slow down opening up service centers. That's really the lifeblood of a startup car maker. Customers need places to, that are within reach to service their vehicles. Rivian has they just opened a Chicago service center. They've also tried to do more mobile service. They come to you to fix your vehicle to try to differentiate themselves. So we'll see kind of what's ahead for this company.
And pardon the pun, but it looks like Rivian trying to put the brakes on that federal climate bill, or at least seek some changes there as well. We'll talk about that perhaps another day. Thank you so much for joining us with that breakdown of the Crain's headlines, Danny Ecker.
Thanks, Amanda.
2 teachers at George Washington High School on the city's far southeast side get to keep their jobs after the Board of Education voted unanimously not to fire them, going against a hearing officer's recommendation. Now, they're teachers at Fence. The district says it's for violating safety protocols. The teachers and their union say they're facing punishment retaliation for encouraging students to participate in an exercise of free speech, protesting against a metal scrap company's attempted move into their community. Here's Chicago Board of Education President Miguel Del Valle after the vote.
I want to affirm that this board believes strongly in culturally relevant education, and it is a core value of CPS.
Joining us are the pair of teachers, Chuck Stark, a science teacher at George Washington High School, and Lauren Bianchi, who teaches social studies also at George Washington High. Now, we did ask the district to participate, and CPS says it could not make an administrator available on short notice. They did send us a statement, which we will get to shortly. But thanks to each of you for being here. Chuck, let's begin with you. At the heart of this is a protest over the company RMG moving its metal scrapping operation from Lincoln Park to the southeast side near George Washington High School. So how did this topic of General Iron come up with your students?
Yeah, and I apologize. I will get back to answering that, but I know that our time is short, and I do want to get some thank yous out there while I have this moment. It's really important. I want to thank the southeast side community. There were lots of teachers, friends, students, families, and organizers from the southeast side that came out and stood behind and by Lauren and I. And that was incredibly moving, and I'm incredibly appreciative of that. And there were 3 members of the community that were already signed up to speak to the Board of Ed to talk about the need for new schools in the southeast side. Mm-hmm. And they had to change what they were going to say to come to our defense. And you know, I do want to thank the Board of Ed for working independently.
Because of course the members are appointed by the mayor, and so that is something that makes this significant. But yeah, Chuck,
thank you so much. Yeah.
So could you get to this issue though of how did this first come up with your students?
How this first came up with our students was back in it was Earth Day of 2020. Okay, and we had just started remote learning. And as you played that clip from the board president, we are always being asked to teach in
the moment
socially responsive education, and that's what we were doing. We started talking about this permit that General Iron was applying for across the street from the school. And we started looking at particulate matter and the 14 tons of particulate matter that were going to be released from General Iron every year blowing towards the school. So it just started, we started learning about what is particulate matter, how does it affect the body? And, you know, students really took it from there. And it became from something where we learn about what the issue is to then students telling us that they want to do something about this. And as educators, we have to ask ourselves, are we going to just gaslight students, or are we going to stand behind them and support them?
So Lauren, can you speak to specifics? And obviously it's different in each of your classrooms and with the students that you collaborate with, but did you specifically tell them to attend one of these protests, give them directions to go?
Well, look, yeah, it's actually required for all CPS teachers, but specifically social studies teachers, to engage our students in critical community issues as graduation requirements, a required civics course. Students are actually encouraged and required in many cases to observe the democratic process, and that includes voting, your rights, and of course, throughout U.S. history, your right to assemble, your right to advocate, your freedom of speech.
And Lauren, how do you bridge that line between teaching that and encouraging participation without perhaps trying to dictate to students how they might feel about a particular issue? Is that difficult?
Well, I mean, if any of you out there have ever tried to dictate anything to a teenager, you know that that's not really possible. That, you know, we facilitate and we create a safe environment for students to ask questions, research, engage, and make decisions for themselves about the type of citizen they want to be. You know, I'm a sociology teacher, and at the heart of the study of sociology is inequality. And so this is an issue of equity. Our schools are not equitable. You know, the ceiling at George Washington High School collapsed on the last day of school. And so students are paying attention. You know, this doesn't get past students, that they know, you know, especially our student athletes.
You're teaching them to be smart, right.
They travel to schools on the north side. They see the facilities and the difference in the quality of the facilities across the city. And our students are speaking up and saying, wow, I didn't realize that a school building could actually be an empowering, beautiful space, because that has not been the buildings that I've learned in.
As promised, I want to be sure to get to the reaction from the district, and that is that they say there are actually several instances of poor judgment exercised by each of you, and issued a statement saying, while promoting civic engagement in our schools is a top priority for CPS, it must be done in accordance with the district's policies and relevant law in order to protect student safety and ensure students are not treated differently based on their willingness to participate in political activities. We hope the warnings directed by the Board of Ed to date will not only address the behavior of these teachers, but ensure that promoting civic engagement among school communities is done appropriately and with due regard for student safety. Chuck, we only have about a minute left, so just briefly, what is your reaction?
I think the unanimous decision of the board to vote not to terminate us against the request of CPS, and who knows where that request initially came from, that says it right there. That, I understand, is a very unusual turn of events for the board to unanimously go against something like that. So I really think that speaks for itself right there.
And we've got approximately 30 seconds. So Lauren, I know that you wanted to talk about green schools. That was part of the effort the folks were going to talk about at that Board of Ed meeting. What is that exactly, and why is that important? Quick.
Yeah, so members of the Chicago Teachers Union, in partnership with parents, students, community allies, we are launching a campaign for state-of-the-art green new school buildings. So CPS has committed to putting solar panels on about 12 school buildings this year. That's a wonderful start, but it is not enough.
And you want George Washington High to be one of them, given that deteriorating condition that you're talking about. We're going to have to leave it there. Our thanks to Chuck Stark and also to Lauren Bianchi.
Thank you.
And up next, a diplomatic setback for the release of American basketball superstar Brittany Griner. But first, a look at the weather.
According to several news reports, Russia wants 2 prisoners in exchange for the release of WNBA star Brittany Griner and former Marine Paul Whelan. The U.S. had offered Russia a swap, Griner and Whelan for convicted arms dealer Victor Bout. Moscow reportedly now wants to add Vadim Krasikov, but he was convicted of murder in Germany, which adds an entirely new level of negotiations. Here's what Secretary of State Antony Blinken said about his conversation with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on Friday.
We had a frank and direct conversation. I pressed the Kremlin to accept the substantial proposal that we put forth on the release of Paul Whelan and Brittany Griner.
And joining us are Alberto Cole, professor of law and U.S. Foreign Relations at DePaul University College of Law. In the early 90s, Cole was Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, serving in the Pentagon. And TJ Quinn, an investigative reporter for ESPN. Gentlemen, welcome both of you back to Chicago tonight. TJ, briefly get us up to speed on Brittany Griner's case and where her current status in Russian custody right now.
Well, this is supposed to be the final week of her trial. The sources close to the case told me that they're expecting a verdict and a sentence on Friday. Typically what happens is the judge reads a full report into the record. She already pleaded guilty. They know it's going to be a guilty verdict. The question is the sentence. But what's important with this is they've known all along, and U.S. officials I've spoken to have said throughout, it's merely a formality. It's part of the theater of the larger negotiation, which is, they expect that she'll come home by a deal cut between the two countries. And this is simply Russia playing out, trying to make this look like it's a completely legitimate process.
Right. It appears that Russia obviously wants to use this as collateral to get folks released that they want. And TJ, as I understand, she faces possibly a 10-year prison sentence?
She does. Typically, they've hit Americans with very heavy sentences. Another American, Mark Fogel, was just sentenced a couple of months ago. Very similar kind of case. He brought medical marijuana into the country. He hasn't disputed the facts of what he was accused of. He said, look, I had a legitimate prescription in the U.S. It was for medical purposes, and he got a 14-year sentence. One difference in their cases is that he has not been declared wrongfully detained by the U.S. State Department, while Brittany Griner has. So whatever negotiations may happen for him, there's no discussion if there's even been talks between the countries. With Brittany Griner, it's always been about that next step.
Right. And Alberto Cole, about that next step, briefly remind us about the history of prisoner swaps as a tenet of foreign policy here between the U.S. and Russia and other foreign adversaries.
Well, so there's something different about this prisoners exchange. And the key difference is that in the past, going all the way throughout the Cold War, the United States and Russia would exchange prisoners, but they would be usually people at the same level. In other words, we would hand over convicted Russian spies, and they would hand over persons who had worked for the CIA, who were American spies. So that was the typical pattern. What's different about this is that Russia wants two very high-value people for them. One is a convicted arms trafficker who's serving a 25-year sentence, Victor Bout, who sold arms throughout Asia, the Middle East, Africa, including to a number of terrorist groups and people engaged in killing Americans. The other one is Mr. Krasakov, who actually murdered a former Chechen fighter who had taken refuge in Germany, and he murdered him at Berlin's Tiergarten. So these are two high-profile Russian agents, Russian targets of great value to them, and they want them exchanged for Brittany Griner, who's an American athlete who has been involved in no intelligence activities, no political activities of any kind, and of course, Mr. Whalen, who also did not do any of those activities. This is the difference. And although we can be very sympathetic, of course, to the idea of these prisoners exchanges, we have to keep something in mind. Short term, it will feel good to have Brittany Griner back, to have Paul Whelan back. But long term, Russia and other bad actors out there will see this as an opportunity in the future to keep grabbing and arresting arbitrarily unsuspecting Americans to trade them for people who have served the Russian government.
So TJ Quinn, could backlash here for those very reasons derail any potential deal just because of how dangerous these two Russians presumably are?
Well, I mean, Alberto's point has been crucial to this all along, and from speaking to experts like him, it's probably why we saw really unprecedented candor from the State Department last week when Secretary Blinken said that the U.S. had indeed made that offer. That's not something they would have admitted, or at least they hadn't previously. And also made it very clear to Russia, look, that second deal is off the table. We talked about Victor Bout. The deal is for Victor Bout. Russia sought him for a long time. So there's been a clear recognition, again, from the experts I've spoken to, that they had to sort of prepare the ground a little bit for the U.S. public, that there would be some backlash. The defense I'm hearing from people in the government and others who follow this closely is that they're trying to do two tracks at once. One is, look, just get the deal, get them home. If that's the price, pay it. And at the same time, the President Biden a couple weeks ago issued an executive order that allows the government to take punitive actions against people involved with what they consider to be illegal detainments. saying that they're trying to address both at the same time, get them home, but also try to remove any incentive that exists for kidnapping them in the future. Whether or not that sells politically, they figure it seems there's really no other choice for them but that path.
Alberto Cole, so if this deal goes the way the Russians apparently want, a 2-for-2 instead of just a 2-for-1, Victor Bout, but adding on Vadim Krasikov, do you think the U.S. pursues that deal, or do they back down?
I think eventually there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Biden administration politically to go ahead and cut the deal. You know, the families of both of these victims have been very, very outspoken. There's a lot of public pressure on the administration. Again, the problem is, yes, you get a short-term victory, but then you're setting a very, very bad precedent. And the executive order that the president issued is largely meaningless. I mean, it really doesn't create any incentives for Russia not to do the same thing again. So the only thing the United States can do, and we've been doing this and doesn't work, is basically to tell Americans not to travel to certain countries where they could be arrested arbitrarily and be used as pawns. But Americans will continue to travel. They'll continue to be doing things in these countries, and they will be continuously victimized. And the Russian government, which is a very, very hard chess player, will make sure that they arrest them and that in return they get back people that they really want to get back.
Very delicate balance. And of course, Griner was in Russia because she worked there. I mean, she was yes. a player for a team in Russia, which paid her more than the WNBA has. We're going to have to leave it there for now. Our thanks to Alberto Cole and TJ Quinn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And up next, one of Minnie Minoso's kids reflects on his dad receiving baseball's highest honor. That's in a conversation that first aired on Chicago Tonight Latino Voices with guest host Marissa Parra of CBS 2. So please stay with us.
On July 23rd, White Sox legend Minnie Minoso made the ultimate home run, a forever home in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Known to many as the Latino Jackie Robinson, Minoso played 12 of his 20 seasons in the majors right here in Chicago. For generations of White Sox fans, he was a favorite for his outstanding performance on the field and his gregarious spirit off of it. Minoso's widow, Sharon Rice Minoso, gave the induction speech at the Cooperstown ceremony. Take a listen.
Through it all, Minnie was never bitter, despite the many injustices and hardships he faced. Today's honor bestowed upon Minnie is most appropriate, not only as a Hall of Fame player, but Minnie was always a gentleman and Hall of Fame person, off the field and in the community.
Joining us now to share a little bit more light, Minnie Minoso's son, Charlie Rice Minoso, and baseball historian and University of Illinois history professor, Adrian Burgos Jr. Charlie, to you first, what was it like for you and your family seeing that moment finally come?
It was such an honor, and it was extremely emotional. I loved seeing the huge display of Black and Latino representation in Cooperstown. I felt so proud of the job my mother did delivering that speech on Dad's behalf, but she really was right in saying that the whole weekend was very bittersweet. It was sweet knowing that Dad's history and contributions will live on, but it was bitter because in addition to this honor not happening in our dad's lifetime, it also missed our brother Orestes' lifetime as well, who we just lost to ALS in March. They played side by side together, his father and son in the Mexican professional leagues, and he was the only person who would have enjoyed the festivities more than Dad.
That's so special. And listen, Adrian, you were there for the ceremony too and have long been advocating for Minnie Minoso's induction. What was it like to see those efforts come to fruition?
Well, it was actually special for me because I got to see Sharon, Charlie, Cecilia, Marilyn, their family members. I was sitting a couple rows behind them to see their joy. This is really what Hall of Fame induction ceremonies are about. It's about their friends and family. It's sad that Minnie, who loved his fans, loved his family, was not there for this. But the outpouring of love for Minnie and his countrymen, Tony Oliva and their family, were just so happy to share this day together with the Miñoso family, and that made it extra special.
Well, Charlie, you actually mentioned this just a moment ago. You said your dad wasn't the only professional baseball player in your family. Your brother actually followed in his footsteps in the Mexican leagues. Tell us a little bit more about him.
Well, he was Dad's mini-me, but it's hard to say someone who was 6'4" was Dad's mini-me, but he was just an amazing person. He was so he was as much of a gentleman than our dad was. I just loved to see the partnership that he had with his wife, Twee. He was just a great person. He was passionate about baseball. He was passionate about his community and his faith. And he just adored our dad. The two of them were as thick as thieves. And I'd like to think that they were with us in Cooperstown together. But again, the only thing that would have made it better is if they were both there themselves. And if Dad were on that stage, they both earned being there themselves. It's what not only our family would have wanted for Dad to have accepted that himself, but it's also what he had deserved. And also, I'm sure all the fans in attendance and who supported our family throughout the years would have loved to have seen that. But still, we find comfort knowing that his legacy and his contributions will live on.
Well, Adrian, we know that Minnie was inducted alongside other players like Buck O'Neil, who also had long careers in the leagues. How important to correcting the historical record were these inductions?
They're very important. It started with Bud Ballard, the very first African-American professional ball player to make a national name for himself, who actually grew up in Cooperstown, so in the 1870s. To Minnie Miñoso, the first Afro-Cubano, Afro-Latino to star in Major League Baseball. It is such a legacy, moving from the Negro Leagues into Major League Baseball, that he inspired so many. And I think finally Cooperstown and other people around baseball are getting a sense of what Minnie meant to the Luis Tiants and Orlando Cepedas and Tony Oliva even. They all looked up to Minnie because he was, and this is not hyperbole, he was our Jackie Robinson. He did it with style, grace, enthusiasm, and excellence on the field. And that he made himself such a part of Chicago, of the South Side community, of the Latino community, of the African-American community, of the Chicago community, was why we so want to remember and celebrate who and what he did, and to have it, live on.
Charlie, to say the least, your father was such a beloved figure in Chicago. What have you heard from his fans about this induction this week?
Just that it, again, was long overdue, as Adrian had mentioned, but it's been wonderful to hear these amazing stories of how Dad has connected with individuals, not just across Chicago, but across the country, across the world, in Latin America, and with his countrymen. It's been amazing to just hear how he's connected with so many, and that he's, still years after he's passed, that he's still loved. And it's been amazing to even all weekend there was like a running joke with Tony Oliva that there was a song of my written about Dad in Cuba called Miñoso al Bate, and in English it basically says that anytime Miñoso would be at bat, the ball would dance the cha-cha. So to see Tony Oliva, mentioning that in his own acceptance speech, and also to see him all weekend, every time he'd see like myself or my mom or my sisters, that's what he would say, and then he'd do his own little cha-cha about Dad, because he just loved him that much, and it was very surreal. But I'm still just, it's still comforting though. But I just wish that people were here to say and share this love with Dad. in person, but I do hope, moving forward that we're able to honor and recognize other pioneers and hidden figures in baseball, for example, like Luis Dion, who Adriana just mentioned, or other contributors to sports and society who are able to hopefully that they can receive their laurels while they're still with us and while they're still around to enjoy them.
Well, thank you so much for both sharing a lot of what you remember and what you know of his life and his legacy, and congratulations on what is such a big honor. We're going to be seeing more photos from the life of Minnie Miñoso later in our program. First, our thanks to Charlie Rice Miñoso and Adrian Burgos Jr.
Thanks for having us on.
Back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabie family, the POLK Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Monday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Senator Joe Manchin clears the way for a major new tax and climate package. We talk with local members of Congress about what it could mean for Illinois.
Plus, historic tragedies depicted on canvas. Meet a local artist inspired by history and calamity. And we leave you tonight with some more family photos of Minnie Miñoso. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Amanda Vinicky. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe. And good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm